Hi, I'm Bork. I'm the president of Focus for our community unity and support, and we're the Lancaster Depew Addiction Prevention Coalition. And today we're presenting on marijuana, youth versus adults perspectives. And today, joining me, I have two guests: John Bennett, the program director of Face to Face with Kids Escaping Drugs, and I have Sally Yageric, the director of community programs with the Prevention Council of Erie County. So, to premise this seminar today, we're going to be looking at adults' perspectives on marijuana and perceptions, as well as the youth, through a collection of research that we collected as an organization within the years of 2020 to 2021. We did separate focus groups with Depew students and youth in our local community, as well as key informant interviews with parents of Lancaster Depew schools, as well as youth from Lancaster and Depew schools. It's a combined report. You can see it on our website at forourcommunitytoday.org as your reference. So when I speak today and I reveal some information on these perspectives and I refer to these reports, these are the research that we have had done professionally and are available on the website. So, are you ready to get started?
Absolutely.
Okay. So first we're going to start with the youth perspectives. And we're going to start with Sally, if you want to take the first question.
Sure.
According to the Focus 2020 Focus Group Report for Lancaster Depew Youth, they reported marijuana as a quote-unquote relatively harmless substance. What data do you have to support or not support that statement?
Marijuana today is a lot different than it used to be. It's a lot stronger. They're using it differently. And the problem with it is, and they think it's harmless, but these are kids whose brain is not finished maturing. And what you have is your brain's made up of chemicals. Every time you add a chemical into it before it is finished maturing, you have a chance to alter the chemicals. So the chemical imbalance of the brain can be changed at that age when they start using, whether it be alcohol, tobacco, or marijuana, any of them. You can alter the chemical balance. And many times, they can have a lifelong problem with some chemicals. In fact, we know that 6 out of 10 kids who start using marijuana young will most likely become addicted to it.
Wow.
Absolutely. And if I can add too, we're on the campus right now, the Kids Escaping Drugs Renaissance campus, and we have kids who are battling addiction to all kinds of different substances. And I'll tell you, probably about half of our kids claim marijuana as their main drugs of choice. These are people who are in inpatient rehab for marijuana.
So relatively harmless it is not.
No.
Not at all.
Next question. According to the Focus 2020 Focus Group Report, you stated that our age group doesn't worry about the risk because it's very common in society. How would either of you respond to that?
Well, I think they don't worry about it because they don't see the future. The kids live in the present, and the things that they're doing now, they have no idea how that's going to affect their future. Marijuana can, because it's not a water-soluble drug, it stays in the brain. It stays in the fatty tissue or the fatty cells. So what happens is it will start to block all of your motivation. Kids will say, oh, I don't feel like doing my homework tonight. Nah, I'm not getting up for school. They start too early. They'll drop out of school. And what happens then is they don't go on to school. They're very unsatisfied with their life. They're just not happy at all. So when they say, we don't worry about it, we need to have them understand that there is a future that is theirs, but they have to be willing to work for.
100%.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't agree more.
So folks, youth reported that marijuana can't be that bad. They're going to make it legal soon in that same focus group report. So how do you think the fact that legalization has occurred will influence our youth on this drug when they already have a low perceived risk?
I think it's going to have a tremendous impact on kids using. Availability is one of the reasons that kids pick up. It's there. They can have it. And with it being legal, it's going to be a whole lot more available for young people.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. Legalization equals commercialization. We're going to see fun characters. We're going to see flavors that are appealing to kids. I have a package right here of a THC solution that a parent gave to me that she found on her child who was about 15 years of age. This is Fruity Pebbles flavored, Flintstones characters. Thought it was simply a vaping solution, but when you flip it over, you can see 85 to 90% THC. So this is significant vaping solution here, and this was for legal sale in California. This is going to be New York soon too.
Yeah, it's interesting that although it's being commercialized and advertised to adults right now, it has cartoon characters on it.
Yeah.
And those fruity flavors, just like the vapes. All right, so John, during this 2020 focus group report, youth reported marijuana use is happening on school grounds with THC vape pens. So what do we know about these THC vape pens?
This is a great time for this question too, because I've spoke with many school officials this week who have found vape pens on students in their school. Actually, one right before this interview. This is an example of a vape pen. They come in a few different styles. Some might look more like the Juul device. Some might look more like vaping devices. This is referred to as a THC pen or dab pen, vape pen. This is the cart or cartridge. It's referred to as cart. This is the device itself, battery in there. Usually these are very potent, significantly stronger than regular marijuana. Now the marijuana of decades past was single digits THC. Now THC is what contains that psychoactive compound that causes the high sensation. As I just showed you, that packaging for vaping solution for a device like this, 85 to 90% THC, so it's significantly stronger. Now, these are very, very popular, and I think as we were just discussing in the last question, they're going to be more and more prevalent as the availability happens too.
And what brand is that? Because I know there's a lot of different brands that a lot of the students are using and youth are using these days.
This particular one is a Vision Spinner.
And do you know, as far as that particular school district that obtained that THC vape pen, do you know where the kids got it? Like, are they getting it online?
Sometimes they're getting it from home. Unfortunately, right now, mom and dad can legally use this stuff. They make that choice. We have to take that approach that if a parent's making that decision, if a guardian's making that decision, keep it away from their kids. Especially as we see more appealing products to kids, which we'll talk about, and edibles and candy and stuff like that. I don't know about you guys, but when I was 7, 8 years old, if there was candy in the house, I was going to eat it.
Absolutely.
And that's going to be a major concern for our families, not just with the vape pens, but with edibles too, for sure.
Too, right. So during that same discussion in the 2020 focus group, youth reported, to that point, a more discreet method of getting high by eating edibles. Even in school. So what do we know about the edibles, their potency, regulation, effects, all those types of things?
Well, I'll start with regulation. Since right now you can't legally obtain edibles in our state, everything they're getting is counterfeit at this point in time or being smuggled in from another state. So if they're being made at home, which in many cases they are, or they're being purchased on the black market, there's no way to fully say what's in there, what the potency is of them. The ones that are being bought in states, a lot of them have a very higher potency than the ones that are being brought into our state from other states. What's really common, unfortunately, in a lot of the kids I've talked to, first time they're doing this, they have the edibles and they don't feel anything, and then 15, 20 minutes, half hour goes by, they're having more. Well, many of these take about an hour sometimes to kick in, so by that they're getting hit with a significant amount of THC that's rendering many of them, unable to perform daily tasks, unable to function at school and easily noticed by school staff and school officials.
Right.
There's even in other states where the edibles are legal, the amount of young people that have ended up in the emergency room and pets.
Yeah.
They'll grab them off the table and eat them. They end up in the emergency room. People get really sick off of the edibles.
Yeah.
They do.
And we, this is information that is happening that we know directly from our, youth right in our community that, gummies, the typical gummy worms, the nerd rope, those are all things that they get access to that looks like candy. It's happening right under our nose. So if we know even on a regulation level, there really is no regulation on the potency. Nobody regulates that. Even in the states that, it's legal. Is that correct? Is there a regulation process? Even
there is a regulation process, but it is very, very not paid any attention to.
Unreliable.
It's written down, but nobody's doing it. It's not being enforced. Many of the states have actually banned edibles, and hopefully New York eventually will do the same thing because of the danger that's involved with them. And people are also making, like they'll make a butter
Yeah.
and use that in their cooking. You serve somebody popcorn and it's covered with THC butter. You're
Yeah.
going to get high on that.
Right. Yeah. Brownies, muffins,
Yeah.
cookies.
And it's so promoted too. I was on Facebook and I had an ad pop up talking about, hey, buy this device, you can make THC butter at home and everything too. So that's a really good point that Sally brings up.
And they said, I have I bought online, it's a whole cookbook full of THC recipes. So you can make just about anything.
I think as, parents, youth, and kind, we'll have to see what happens with New York State and, what type of regulations they put into place as far as monitoring potency, what levels of potency are allowed. So this will be interesting how it plays out.
I spoke with quite a few kids who told me that they took very high potent edibles and they felt the effects into the next day.
Wow.
Yeah, the effects last much longer with the edible.
Yeah. So according to the same focus group report, youth interviewed said they don't worry about the effect, that it may have on them. So, why do you think that is? I know Sally alluded to that in the beginning a little bit. Why do you think it is, John?
Sally hit the nail on the head. They focus on the here and now. A lot of them, have immediate issues that marijuana is able to help them with. I mean, we all have ways to cope, whether it's listening to music, playing a sport, drawing, scrapbooking, spending time with family, those type of things. But unfortunately, sometimes kids gravitate towards unhealthy ways of cope, whether it's drug use, self-harm, stuff like that. And in this case with marijuana, they see it as a potential help with their problems. However, the problems are still there at the end of the day.
That's right.
But they get that immediate relief is what they're chasing for. So it's a big reason why they don't worry about the future, because they worry about just the here and now many times.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times what they need to learn is, they can take marijuana to help cope. But down the road, it makes it even worse because the marijuana doesn't help anymore. And it really causes paranoia. They're finding out the psychotic episodes that people have on it. There's a lot of research that we don't know that is just coming out. And we need to pass that along to young people to have them be educated about it.
That's right. Yeah, it can create, marijuana use disorder, which causes a whole bunch of issues. So 100%, right? I think, and I'm with you on that. So if any youth that could be listening, sure, it's, whether it's alcohol, it's marijuana, you choose. That could be, though, your last choice at that time, unfortunately, because of some of what we know is what's happening, the fentanyl being mixed with marijuana. That could be the last time that you cope. You attempt to cope with a situation. So, we, just like us as adults and parents and community leaders, we've had to learn to learn how to cope with life without having to rely on substances. And it takes time, and the sooner you get on to that process of figuring out what you need to do in life to cope, it's going to be better off for you in the long run.
Yeah, one other thing, if they learn to cope by doing a fun activity or something, that's repeatable.
That's
But
right.
if you cope through using drugs, that experience is never the same. And each time, you'll need a little more. You can't repeat that first experience.
Yeah.
But you can always have a good time skiing or doing something
That's
that's
right.
fun to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Still spikes the dopamine,
Yeah. Communication too is a big one that kids take for granted. A lot of kids keep stuff bottled up, but even in our early intervention programs, kids who do keep things bottled up feel significantly better just having a brief conversation about what's going on. So I would definitely encourage adolescents to connect with somebody at school they trust, even if it's not at home, somebody, maybe a teacher, guidance counselor, school resource officer, principal, coach. Having those conversations, it's a great way to cope that many adolescents unfortunately don't take advantage of.
That's right. Yeah. Probably more prevalent with boys too.
Mm-hmm.
And that frontal lobe, it doesn't develop, until like in their mid-20s anyway. So here you are, for any youth that could be listening, it's like here you are trying to cope, and your frontal lobe is even at the point where you understand what you're doing. It's those short-term, decisions and outcomes that you're looking for, and you're going to be able to affect potentially the rest of your life with what you do right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, youth also reported in this focus group that marijuana was used, so we talked about that, for a few different reasons, to cope with the stresses of life. Yet we know that 60% of the students that we surveyed in grades 8th, 10th, and 12th in 2019 in the Prevention Needs Assessment Survey for Depew and Lancaster, they said that it still posed a moderate risk. So, what are your statements on these types of contradictions, John?
So my personal belief is many times kids might identify as a peer. Oh, hey, they have a problem with this stuff. Me, no, I'm using it responsibly and everything. When that's sometimes not the truth. I met with a young man who told me that he was one of those people who can use this stuff every now and again and not have issues. But as the conversation went on, he disclosed he stole a significant amount of money from his parents to support his habit. He disclosed he got kicked off of a sports team for showing up to practice high. He disclosed that more often than not, he goes to school high. But his train of thought was that he's one of those people who can do this stuff every now and again and not have an issue. So I think where they see it as a risk for some of their peers, they don't necessarily identify the risk as on themselves, in my opinion.
And I know I'm a certified addiction recovery coach and trainer, and there's the course that we take that's certified with New York State is called Developing Discrepancies. So it's like as you're interviewing people who want to make change, who might not see that they don't even have a problem, you're always kind of finding those discrepancies in their argument. Like you just said, well, is it? Are you dependent or not you dependent? So, as youth and parents, have these conversations with your friends, right? I mean, do you have a problem or really don't you? Sally, any comments?
And I think one of the things that you can ask a young person is, a lot of times they're not asking anymore, what do you want to be when you grow up? I can't answer that question real good myself, but a young person, if they're thinking about it and they'll say, well, I'd like to be an engineer. What would ever stop you from getting there? What has hindered you at this point from getting an A in class or and they'll start thinking about, well, maybe it is the marijuana that's stopping me from doing certain things. Since I got kicked off the team, I'm going to have a bad record from school. And what a lot of them don't realize is you can't get student loans if you have a conviction for drug use. So all of these things would stop them. And if they think about that and convince them to keep their eye on the future, and sometimes they'll stop.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I know, right? The baby steps, the small little steps that affect the rest of your life. That's, the marijuana itself, right, has all these other byproducts and symptoms like you guys are talking about, not wanting to go to school, not wanting to get up. It's not a big deal. I'll skip today. And that's like just a tsunami of potential after effects that could last long into your life of being able to hold a job, be responsible to be able to pay your bills, have a car, have freedom. Yeah, 100%. And I don't know if we're going to talk about this today, but some of the consequences, even with, if you're caught with these substances, you're still under 21. If you're a youth and you have these things, it may be viewed differently on an adult size level, but it's still there's consequences if you have these substances, whether it's at home or at school or at your job, it's still illegal. You're a liability. In this, the Focus 22 focus group report, it states, Sally, that youth feel that the consequences of getting caught using marijuana are less likely to get caught because of how discreet the THC vape pens and edibles are. So we're kind of alluding to this right now. How do you think that the ability to use it, hide it, and detect it affects the rate of use and potentially cause a disorder?
I think that kids are using more because you don't have to smoke like you used to have in the bathrooms. They're vaping right in class.
Right.
They believe you can't smell it. You can. You don't know what it is, but you do smell something. I think they're using more for that reason. They truly don't get caught as much, but they do get caught. As John said, he's been talking to the school, the resource officer. Kids aren't getting caught, especially if they're vaping the THC because of the high THC content in it.
That's right.
It's gonna show. You're going to look like you're high.
Yeah, and I know that part of our drug-free communities grant, we were able to reallocate some money when COVID prevented us to travel for some of the training that we were required to do. We were able to reallocate some of those funds to the school resource officers, and we paid about $2,000 for testing kits for both school resource officers for Lancaster and Depew. So, again, any youth or parents of youth that have students in the Lancaster Depew community, like these school resource officers are armed with testing kits to be able to test any vape pens or any substances for marijuana, synthetic marijuana, and any other drugs that could be potentially in those vape pens. So if you think that your kid does this, or you're a youth and you're watching and you think that nobody's paying attention, not only do these two organizations go within the schools and educate the teachers and the staff on what to look for, the school resource officers are armed with ways to test what's inside your vape pens. So you will, as technology evolves, you'll be found out, and there will be more and more consequences to where you might not think that nothing's available right now.
I've had some conversations with school building and ground managers who are informing me that their vape detectors have been picking up the THC pens too, which is significant.
That's right. Yeah. And to go back to that, I guess that last piece of that question, we know that if things are discreet, if you can do something discreetly, you're going to do more of it. So we know the rates are higher because of what's so easily accessible.
The best way
because it's more potent, the kids are going to get addicted sooner.
That's right.
The only way to guarantee you don't get caught using at school is not to use at school.
That's right. Yeah. So, John, when asked how youth obtain marijuana in the Focus 2020 Focus Group Report, they stated from, quote unquote, older siblings, older friends, student with connections, parents who approve, and online platforms like Instagram and Snapchat. So what risks do youth take buying and using marijuana, what all those, forms that we've talked about so far, from others?
Yeah, so this is actually a question I went out and I talked to some of our youth about. And they gave some answers. They risk getting laced drugs. Some of them have gotten drugs that were laced. Some of them provided the laced drugs. One kid in particular.
And what do you mean laced, John? Like, what do you mean?
So there could be other substances in it.
That's right.
So, it could be like cocaine or, heroin or what have you, a different drug mixed in with that drug. Could be a fake drug. I had one young man who was telling me that he was providing peers of his the vape cartridges filled with honey. Now, honey looks very similar to that THC solution, so he made a significant amount of money selling a fake product to other people.
That's right.
They could get robbed. That's happened to quite a few of our alumni. They set up a deal, and unfortunately they end up getting robbed. Discipline, whether it's at home, at school, legal consequences, and losing friends. That was a big one that the kids referred to. They lost a lot of friends by engaging in that activity. Friends who were against it distanced themselves from them too. So those were some youth-focused ones that were given them.
That's right, yeah.
And I think too, the loss of trust from your family. That's so hard on kids when they're not trusted anymore. I mean, imagine how you'd feel, every time you want to go out, somebody would look at you and say, well, what are you going to do while you're out? They wait for you to come home and sniff what you smell. It's so demeaning to a young person. But it's needed. I mean, once you lose their trust.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. I don't know, over the past couple of years especially, we've seen marijuana being laced with fentanyl. So, aside from that, that could be the last hit of, marijuana you'll ever take. Or these vape pens, they're tossed off to you like, hey, take a hit of that. And it's not the THC vape pen, it's the synthetic, weed pen, which is K2 or Spice, and that actually puts people in the hospital.
Yes, it does.
So, you would think you were doing something innocent, and meanwhile, you're taking something, you don't know where it came from, you don't know who made it, who developed it, and just like you said, John, you could be, get a cart that's filled with a liquid that you don't even know what that is.
It's back to the regulations. They're not existent.
Absolutely.
There were absolutely no regulations up until a couple of years ago where the FDA finally got involved, and a lot of these companies were grandfathered in to not have to disclose their ingredients. So just when, you're out there as a youth thinking that, it's fine, it's safe, it's on the market, there's nothing in there that's bad, and, we don't know that. Nobody knows that.
In fact, the last opiate report that came out for the overdose, there were 80% of the overdose deaths were lace drugs.
Sure.
You know, so you just, there's nothing out there that's safe.
I know.
Absolutely.
There's, you know, on a personal level, there's two people, you know, one connection away from myself within the past month that overdosed from mixed, you know, drugs. One was cocaine, another one was heroin, but it's like, there's no safety.
No, none whatsoever.
So it's like, as they're watching today, you know, potentially, again, you think it's any different now as an adult who is trying to cope using drugs than it was when they were a teen trying to cope? They're still trying to do the same thing, and then here it goes. It potentially leads to them overdosing and dying. You know, nobody wants that. There's a life to live for you. And yeah, the whole Instagram and Snapchat thing, I've seen it. You know, a lot of kids too that we've interviewed, they're getting it from medical marijuana type of scripts. So they get it from their parents, or they're even allowed to have it for anxiety or whatever they're being prescribed, and then they go and they sell it on Instagram and Snapchat. So, all right. Last question for our youth perspectives. According to this focus group report, we find that youth state a common theme of low perceived risk from other youth, parents, and other adults in the community, with this whole legalization as the leading factor. We found out of this report, the whole legalization thing was the leading factor of these changing views that they're just low risk or no risk. So what do we know what happens to usage when these perceived risks, you know, decline?
Well, kids are going to use more. If it's not dangerous, if there's no reason why they shouldn't, well, they make medicine out of it. How's it going to hurt me? And if the adults in the community are also giving the impression that there's no risk, and the adults' impression is coming from the old marijuana,
Sure.
not so much the new marijuana, which is very dangerous. Kids are going to use more because we're saying it's legal.
Yeah, right. I did that when I was a kid.
Yeah.
It's not a big
And you're
deal.
not going to get in trouble now because it's legal.
Yeah. And it's like the constant rebuttal, you know, I mean, so like, you know, any parents I think that are watching, you know, we're going to get into your perspectives that we found in these reports, but this is not, you know, yes, it's used medicinally. Yes, it's prescribed. That doesn't mean that it's right for your child. It's not. We know that it affects your brain. It affects the youth. It affects their ability to reasoning and the development of their frontal lobe. So we don't want that. It's if you really love your kids and you want them to a successful life, you know, it's not okay. It's just not okay
at all. And because of the legalization, it's made it harder for parents.
Yeah.
You know, because of the perception kids have now.
Right.
It's harder to say no. It's harder to keep it away when it's next door.
That's right. Yeah. And the whole access thing.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was already being prescribed to, you know, parents and youth right now in our area for anxiety or whatever reasons, it's right in their house. And so it was already in their house now over the past year, whatever that went through. And now we're going to have it on a recreational, you know, non-medicinal level. And it'll be in a lot of houses. It's way more access. So, okay, now we're going to kind of switch gears into the parents' perceptions and perspectives that we've gained from the reports that we've collected over the past year and a half, and look at it more in again, like a point-counterpoint type of situation. This is what we know that you think based off our research. What are our responses as, you know, we'll call it addiction prevention experts in this field to help our community members, parents, engage with their youth, help them understand the risks and how their thoughts actually affect youth, and how they can start having conversations with other parents. You know, because we're going to see a trend even with the parents' perspectives and how that influences our youth and their usage. So, first question. According to the 2020 combined Key Informant and Focus Group report, 71% of adults in the Lancaster Depew area reported having favorable attitudes and behaviors to marijuana use. Why do you think that is, and what is your response to that, Sally?
I was really surprised to see that it was that high, only because I think that when the parents give the perception or get, the perception for their kids is it's okay. The kids are going to use. I think that we need to do a really good job educating parents about the dangers of kids using. There's nothing we can say to the parents because they're legal, but young people are not. And as adults, we need to give the perception that this is not a good idea. This is going to harm you. So we have a big job to educate out there.
We do. John, any comments or?
No, I'm gonna piggyback off that for the next question.
Okay,
for
good.
Sure.
So in that same report, local adults reported that 86% of youth perceive little risk of marijuana use. So do you think there's a connection between the adults and youth perspectives when it comes to usage?
100% I do, and I think, again, Sally hit the nail on the head. You must be a carpenter, Sally.
All
Hitting the nail
right.
on the head today. For sure, parents need to have those conversations. If they're making the legal decision to use those products, they need to educate their adolescents as to why it's not safe for them to use those products too. The brain development, I think the point that Sally made up earlier is a key point that should be, made known to kids by their parents too. And not only just that, the parents who don't have any kind of discussion with their kids too, that goes to show their kids that they don't have a strong stance on it too. So I encourage parents to have ongoing discussions with their kids. Don't make it awkward. I mean, we're hearing about it in the
Sure.
news all the time. So that's a key opportunity to have those conversations, an ongoing conversation with your kids, and create honest and open dialogue with them to show them, hey, look, this isn't something I support too. And one thing that we see all the time is parents not letting their children know what their expectations are of them, and then setting consequences that they know they're not going to carry through. It's the second they set a consequence that they're not willing to enforce, they show the child that they run the roost and that you don't mean
That's
what you
right.
say. So I always encourage parents, let your child know what your expectation is, as well as what the consequence will be if they break those expectations, but then follow through with them.
100%.
And there are a few places that parents can go to for conversation points. For starters, like the Talk It Over. If you go online to the Talk It Over campaign, they'll give you all kinds of starters, things, way to open the conversation with your kids. We have teachable moments every day. If you're watching the news, you're watching
Sure.
TV, use them. But if you can't use them, go to one of the websites and find out what the best way to talk to your kids is, because they don't know what you're thinking. And they also, you have to talk to them differently as they age because their brain is maturing. I always tell parents, if your kids don't ever say what a nag you are, you're not doing your job. You need to be a nag. You need to talk over and over again because they don't hear the first time. It doesn't sink in. Keep saying it.
That's right. Yeah, it's interesting as, I'm a mom, obviously, as my kids even get older, as teenagers, they know more than I do, even in this field. So what my kids at 15 and 17 know, and the devices that they see and the things that are accessible to them surpasses where I'm at this point in time at this very single moment. So it's like what my kid sees tomorrow is more than what I've seen today.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep up with them.
It's very hard to
And
keep
the
up.
thing to remember is what they're seeing is not always accurate. They're seeing what their friends are telling them. So you need to be prepared with accurate information.
That's right. Yeah. And I agree with that. So I think that, having precise information, research, data, just like any teenagers, they want to argue and they want to contradict, your point, saying that's not true, that's fear mongering or that's, fake news. You have to have your data correct. So, start engaging, this should be a very beginning point for you as a parent to start looking up the research that, we're going to provide some potential resources. And, these two organizations are also resources to you as parents for any questions that you may have, but you need to be prepared with accurate information so that when your child does go to Google it, it's fact checked, right?
Absolutely.
So, Sally, according to the Key Informant Interview Report that we did in 2020, local adults reported that compared to other drugs, marijuana is not a big deal. So, any comments on that perspective? And I will premise that, this compared to other drugs is, I'm sure heroin, you know, the bigger, the big one, heroin, fentanyl, when we've had a lot of overdoses and that we were declared, you know, there was an opioid epidemic. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think for one thing, marijuana is a gateway drug. I mean, maybe it's not as bad as heroin when you start using it, but it is a gateway drug that will take you to heroin. And research will show us that over and over again. People used to say marijuana is not addictive, it's not a gateway drug. Well, it is. And if you look at the number of people that have died from our other legal drugs, alcohol, tobacco, marijuana is going to be the same way because of the increased potency.
That's right.
It's very important. We've talked about it quite a bit today, but we all hear it every single day from parents and grandparents. Hey, I smoked marijuana when I was younger. What's the big deal? As we've said, the big deal is how significantly stronger it is. We're looking at single digit potency, 1 to 3% in the 60s and 70s, slowly increasing after that, to the concentrates that are, I saw one in Colorado that was advertised 99.9% THC. It's a horse of a different color. And one of the arguments is, hey, this is a natural thing. It's a plant. When we look at these highly processed and synthesized concentrates, there's nothing natural about them anymore.
That's right. Yeah, Frankenweed, right?
Yeah.
I think that with that, and taking into consideration, you're right. Like, this isn't the stuff that we as parents were exposed to when we were younger. The potency in itself, it's being developed that way. This isn't some natural. It's not a natural occurrence in nature.
In the way that it is being used.
Right.
With the vaping.
So, and we know, and again, John, this question is for you. According to that Key Informant Interview Report, we found that 26% of all responses to marijuana use showed that because of legalization, exposure to pro-media and reduced stigma to marijuana use were contributors to changes in the attitudes and behaviors among our youth. So what do you think adults have to do with that?
Yeah, so one thing I will tell you about youth is they're very observant. They focus in on adults and they look to see the reaction of parents, teachers, coaches, politicians, and see what, and celebrities alike too, especially on social media. When they're fanning the fire for legalization, it shows that messages to our youth that, hey, this stuff's okay, and in many cases encouraged.
That's right.
They gravitate towards those type of people, and it's important we send the right messages too when it's definitely not appropriate or beneficial to adolescents.
That's right.
John, as you were saying before, that legalization goes to commercial.
Yeah.
Look at how many of our celebrities now have a brand
Yep.
That's
of
right.
marijuana. They have a beverage named after them that has THC in it.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, and I know we're going to take some pictures of some of the devices and stuff that, between John and Sally, they have provided today. One of those is a Bang, the energy drink. So if your kids are on TikTok or they're on Snapchat or Instagram, Bang is probably one of the most glorified, most, celebritized type of energy drink right now that TikTokers are getting paid to promote. And now this energy drink created its own brand of a THC vape, right?
Right.
So we're going to show pictures of that. But again, I think as parents, you need to be like, if you're not, I'm not on TikTok, get on TikTok.
Yeah.
Because that's a way for you to connect with your kids, understand what's going on in the algorithm, just like the crazy vines and the ice, bucket challenge and whatever. There are trends that are happening and that will always happen. Doesn't matter what media these kids are on. So, vines were bad or TikTok is bad. Anything can be bad if it's used that way. But you could use it as an advantage and leverage to understand what trends are happening on social media, what these kids are smoking, how they're modifying their vapes, and to be able to have, I've seen TikToks where they create almost like a gun that combines multiple cartridges, multiple batteries and mods, like for this massive vape pen that looks like an actual gun.
Yeah.
It's
And how
crazy.
dangerous is that?
Right.
We've
The
had
potency
we've
on
had them
something like
blow
that.
up with the batteries. They've blown up.
Yeah. It's just get on TikTok and watch what's going on.
Good point.
All right. So where are we? We are on question 6, right, John? Oh no, question 5. So we in the 2020 Key Informant Report, adults reported that marijuana was the lesser of evils as compared to other drugs deeming harmless, even if used by the youth. And I appreciate, everyone's patience with this, but we are just continuously providing more and more information that we've collected, words out of our local community's mouth, youth or parents, of these perceptions. So, we're going to continuously then bring these redundant points back up. But again, back to the question, adults have reported marijuana is the lesser of evils compared to other drugs. It's harmless, even if used by our youth. So what is your response to that?
Yeah, by no means is every single kid who experiments with marijuana going to develop onto other drugs and develop addiction issues, but many do. Just like I said, on this campus, over half the kids claim marijuana as their main drugs of choice. These are kids who were, good students in school and got to the point where they couldn't go to school unless they were high. Kids who were involved in sports, clubs, activities, band, art, music, and then quit those things to focus solely on getting high. That type of things we do see in many students who get involved with this stuff. And also Sally's point to the gateway drug. This is 100%, whether you call it a gateway drug or not. I personally do, just as Sally does. You can't argue that it's a gateway to a lifestyle.
Correct.
Without a doubt. It's going to bring you around people you weren't around before. It's going to bring you around a higher probability of getting something that's laced. It's going to bring you around other substances. It's 100% a gateway to that lifestyle, which will lead you to other drugs if you stick with it.
Yeah.
That's right. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's not gateway to, if they do this, that they're going to naturally go to heroin or whatever, but it's that lifestyle. If you're around people that smoke marijuana, eventually they're going to maybe try cocaine, and then they're going to do this, and they're going to try that, and then they're going to know someone who has heroin or whatever. So, you hang out with people. My dad always used to say, birds of a feather flock together.
Yes.
And I was like, no, Dad, I'm stronger than that. I'm an independent, and meanwhile, he was right. I left home at 15 and went down that road. So in the Focus 2020, Key Informant Report, it was found that some parents smoke marijuana with their kids. What kind of message does that send to youth and their friends?
Yeah, I'm very excited for this question because I see this quite a bit, actually. And I actually talked to a couple youth on our campus the other day about this. And the big answer is it shows that you can keep doing this into adulthood and it's totally okay. It shows them that, hey, there's no consequences of this. You can keep going. It's not going to affect you. When many times that's not the case. There are going to be some issues because of it. It also is, parents are those kids' number one role models, without a doubt. They mirror them. They look to them for advice and guidance. I had a young man on campus a few years back who, unfortunately, his mom, she told him that he couldn't smoke weed until he was 18 years old. He had smoked weed and he went downstairs. At this time, he was 15. He had a joint. He lit it. He handed it to Mom. Mom took that joint, hit it, passed it back to him, and they proceeded to continue to smoke with each other on multiple occasions. As this young man progressed, I had a conversation with him. I said, did part of you hope that your mom would have smacked that out of her hand and said, what are you doing? You're not allowed to do this? And he said, yes. But the second she took that from him and engaged it with him, it showed him this is totally okay.
Confirmation.
Yep, confirmation. So that is a big risk that the parents have when they engage in that activity with their kids. If parents are making that decision to do it legally at this point in time, that's fine. That's their choice. I'm not condoning. I'm not saying that I'm going to do that, but if they're doing it, they have that legal right to do so. What they don't have the legal right to do is to do so with their children.
To influence their kids, 100%.
And I think for them to also be conscious of the second hand.
Mm-hmm.
If you're smoking in the house with kids around, the kids are getting it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So even though it's legal,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people don't smoke tobacco in the house.
Mm-hmm.
That's right, yeah.
Don't smoke marijuana either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I will say, there are a lot, I know personally, there's a lot of parents that smoke marijuana that think, my kids don't know, they can't smell it, they don't know the difference. They definitely
Yes,
do.
they do.
And I don't know if you can attest to this, but I'd say by 9, kids are really starting to mature. They understand, they see things on the internet, and they start realizing what things are, what things look like. So, what would you say, the earliest ages that kids start really picking up on this? Do you have any comments?
I'd say 8 maybe.
8, 9, yeah. I think
Yeah.
I think you guys are absolutely right.
Okay.
That's what I've seen too.
Yeah.
And we like to think that it's much older. The kids, hey, 14, 15, they're starting to hear about it. No, it's significantly younger.
That's right. Yeah, and I think we all, as parents, I would like to think the majority of us are always trying to be, the best parents that we possibly can, and our examples are the greatest influence. So if you're unknown on a perspective on these particular perceptions on marijuana or whatever, again, I think we just always go back to do your research, educate. We are brought to, prevention and addiction experts right to your home where you're at right now. These are people that are telling you what they see, what we know. Get educated, and if you don't know, finalize your statement, finalize your opinion, and even if you agree, don't influence your youth, because if you really want to be the best parent that you possibly can, you want your kid to grow up and be a leader in the community or a business owner, you want them to have the best chance at life, then you have to withhold those opinions until they're at a position where it's not necessarily going to affect their brain development. Nobody wants to affect their child's brain development. No parent wants that, right? So okay, Sally, according to this same report, so that Key Informant report, adults also showed a theme. So this was a theme is obviously something that was happening over and over again. We were asking these adults a lot of the same questions. Favorable attitudes for using marijuana. And there were two main reasons. So this was a theme that was coming out of the research. There were two main reasons. One, it can be used for medical reasons, which we talked about. And two, it's going to be legal anyway. So we're going right back to the same type of perception that we know that the youth, we knew because it was being legalized, that was their main predominant perspective that influenced that it was low risk, which then influences their usage, right? So when it comes to adults, what do we know about this legislation that we're talking about here and how it affects youth and our community?
I think it's going to affect them greatly. And we've said this already. The availability of marijuana is going to increase usage. We see that all the time. The lesser harm also will influence their use. It's gonna play havoc with our communities, I'm afraid.
Right, and we've seen, some of the research we've done even over the past year with Focus is like we took, the National Institute of Drug Abuse and our state offices that all they do is research and break down the trends that have happened in states where they've legalized marijuana, and we've seen it. Colorado, California, we see drug use skyrockets once marijuana is legalized. So we know that this isn't an opinion. This is fact. You can look at some of our research. According to the survey that we've done and brought all that research together. But this is like if we know that what was it 2 years ago, the governor of New York State said that New York State had a vaping epidemic, right? He actually called it an epidemic.
Yes.
So if we know that vaping's an epidemic, and we know that kids are vaping at a very rapid rate, more and more and more, and now they're smoking THC from vapes.
Right.
I would like to believe we're going to end up with a THC vaping epidemic.
Yes.
I mean, don't you agree?
I agree. And with the vape, even if it is just nicotine, that one pod, once a young person has gone through that pod, they're addicted to nicotine. And they're going to easily move on to putting marijuana or THC in there. And when you say, well, we use it for medicine, it can't hurt you. If you think about, do you take a chemo drug just because it's a medicine and it's there? You wouldn't. It's specifically for a certain illness.
That's right.
So, I don't know how we can relay that to kids. Yes, they use it to make drugs, but they use a lot of things to make drugs that we wouldn't want you taking.
That's right.
Just for the recreational.
Yeah, and I think that takes it back to the parents too, having that ongoing communication with their kids and that conversation, because that's a very good point. It might be, prescribed for somebody to help with an issue, but if somebody has back issues and is taking opiate painkillers and my back starts hurting me, I'm not jumping for that opiate painkiller. I've seen what those can do to people too, and we have to educate our kids on marijuana because it's going to be a hot topic.
That's right. So. I know the agencies that we quote unquote trust for a very long time, like when the pharmaceutical companies and the FDA. I mean, they approved these opiates that created an opiate epidemic, a heroin epidemic. And then we didn't realize until obviously later how addictive it is. We don't know how this is going to affect our kids. So,
exactly.
We need to be on the defensive side of that as parents. And obviously, we know that with all the vaping that's happening with our youth, we know how much of a problem it is in the schools, at home. They're getting it. They can order in boxes of it. All you got to do is just claim you're 18 or 21, whatever state you live in, and you get a whole box shipped to you, and then they're being sold to the students in the school. So you can go to the local res, and grab you can grab now edibles from the res, THC vapes from the res. So it's all super accessible, and now it's just going to become overwhelmingly accessible. They won't even have to order it in. They'll just go to the store down the street. Okay, so question number 8. The Focus 2020 Key Informant Report shows that adults have a low perceived risk for using marijuana themselves. So let's kind of get into that. They say that it poses a low risk to their health. They've used it to self-medicate, and it's not harmful. Is it harmful or pose any risk to adults? I mean, what are your thoughts on it? I mean, I know with the legalization, and we talked about if it's prescribed to you and things like that. What kind of risks does it pose to either adults or the environment, the family? What do you think?
Well, I was just actually reading a study done in Canada on the effect it has on the heart. I saw that marijuana users are twice as likely to have heart attacks and heart conditions when they're using marijuana on a regular basis. Even taking out the health effects on it too, I think the most damage they're doing is setting that example to their kids if they're not having that communication with them too. It's showing them, hey, you can do this stuff. Now, I like to think that parents who have beers on occasion or have a glass of wine on occasion or having conversations with their kids at home saying, hey, look, this is how I'm doing this stuff responsibly. I'm an adult, my brain's fully developed. Similar discussions should be happening with parents who decide to do this marijuana legally in the future as well.
That's right.
I like to hopefully think that will take place with them.
And let's hope that they weren't using when they were younger and stunted their ability to have these, fully developed brains where they could make these strategic choices, right? Decisions.
Yeah.
Sally, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think if you look at the harm from smoking a tobacco cigarette, marijuana is just as bad. All of the health risks, your lungs,
right.
Your kidneys, your liver, every organ is affected by it. So there's a lot of risk. They just don't want to admit.
That's right.
I always say people will defend to their death their drug of choice,
That's right.
whether it be caffeine or anything. And that's what happens with marijuana.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we should know. There's so much research out there. But just like the internet, you can find 2 opposing views.
Sure.
And whatever view you have, you can find research to support it. Yeah. So, get educated on your own risks. I mean, who wants to, have these types of issues, when they're still young parents and young adults and they have young kids. You want to see your kids grow up and have grandbabies,
And I think your point about the internet is very well taken. We need to know what are reliable sources. 9 out of 10 sites are pro-marijuana on the internet. So we need to know what reliable sources to go to. Look and see who's funding surveys. Makes a big difference. The way they tweak them to go one way or another.
Yeah, which way it leans, right? Yeah, great point. And I think that goes with everything, right?
Yes.
Whoever funds the research, you're going to see views skewed a certain way, so be smart. We know that big, tobacco is, supporting vape companies. Yes. Now they're going to be supporting marijuana.
They have, was it 55% of the marijuana business is now owned by tobacco companies?
Yeah.
So it's going Same way.
And that's a lot of money. Those are big pockets, and they do a lot, if you were to break that down as far as how much money that they give to lobby
Yep.
for politicians. It's a lot of money. It's
Sure
a lot of
is.
influence in government. So just because the government says yes or no, it doesn't necessarily always mean it's good for you.
Mhm.
All right. So when asked if adults knew the difference between THC and CBD and the variations of these for consumption, so we did. We talked about, do you know what CBD is? Do you know what THC is? Do you know what edibles are? Do you know, vape pens, THC vape pens? We ask a lot of the adults that we interviewed the same questions that we found out from the youth. How are they, consuming or using marijuana? So when asked if adults knew the difference between THC and CBD and the variations for these consumptions during this Key Informant report, it was found that adults rarely knew the differences or the potencies. I mean, we flat out had very highly, and we did when we were very strategic when we chose our key informant, because when you're saying key informant, that is someone, if we're going to interview someone, they are a key person into that specific demographic or culture or area. So when we chose parents in the Lancaster community, we chose parents in high income level, dual income houses, very highly educated, where they're making 6 digits, and they were very prevalent, high level learners and people high up in companies. Then we had Lancaster parents that were on the lower income level, that weren't living in, the cul-de-sacs off of William Road, So we chose demographics on both sides of the full spectrum of the Lancaster School District, as well as Depew, whether it was socioeconomic or educational and whatever. And we chose that for a reason, to get both perspectives within, our communities within a community. And so to hear some of these most educated, CEO, C-suite level parents not even know the difference.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, that was very interesting to hear. So like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting because the CBD is actually from the hemp cannabis plant. Now, they're allowed to have 0.03% THC in it. Who's regulating it again? Have no idea. New York State recently has made, now THC that we're real familiar with is the Delta 9. Well, Delta 10 and Delta 8 were always available. Recently, New York State has made them illegal. So when you go into a vape store, supposedly you're not supposed to be able to buy it, because they also contain THC. The Delta 10 is a higher THC. So there's a difference in that the Delta 9, the THC that we're familiar with, has the highest. But the other ones, the gummy bears that are made with the Delta 8 and 10, also contain THC.
So different parts of the plant,
Yep.
ultimately.
Yep.
John, any comments on
No,
that?
I definitely see why it would be confusing for parents to stay up to date on all this stuff. I mean, Sally and I do this stuff for a living,
Sure.
and sometimes
Still
it's a challenge
confusing.
for us. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I definitely encourage parents to educate themselves on it. Get online. Go to reputable sites. Educate yourselves on this stuff, because it's challenging to stay on top of it for sure. But it is important that parents do stay on top of it, because it's exposed to our kids for sure.
That's
and part
right.
of the hemp cannabis plant is also used for rope, for
That's
paper, for things that make sense. So it was hard to pull that out of the farm bill and make it illegal, because people learned that there was THC in it and they were using it.
That's right. Yeah, so the CBD component of the plant is, not necessarily, it's not the part of the plant that creates the high, right? It's the THC, which is a chemical compound, the
Tetrahydrocannabinol.
Yeah.
There it is. Okay, see? That creates that type of high experience. And like Sally just mentioned, you can go into some of the smoke shops and they sell the gummies. They sell gummy worms, they sell gummy bears, the Nerds on a Rope, and they had those Delta 9s and the different types of compounds that are part of that THC component in their gummies.
Yes. And
So-
one thing you need to be aware of, if you don't educate yourself on this, say you have a CDL license and you get pulled over, and they do random testing. If you've been having gummies that you didn't think had THC in them, well, you're out of luck.
That's
because
right.
it's going to
Yeah.
show.
Yeah, and I don't think is there a regulation that says, you know, for these suppliers to test it as far as their potencies? Like, is it listed on the container?
No.
How much THC is a part of
I
that
have not seen
CBD
it.
product?
I have not
Right.
seen it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Not that I've seen either. I haven't
Mhm.
seen it either. You know, so I mean, there's a lot of people that are constantly like, oh, we offer the CBD products, and you can give it to your dogs, and
Mhm.
it helps with pain, and this and that and this, and it's a tincture, and so yeah, it's a constantly evolving market, and I would just again kind of tell the parents, go to some of these other states. We'll provide, you know, legitimate resources, but
Right.
you have to know what's happening. And right now, it's a very we're in a, I don't even know what to call it, like a black hole of lack of information.
Waiting to fall
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah, exactly. What's
Yeah.
going to happen now in New York State? We don't know how this is going to play out with these laws.
For sure. I get asked a lot too by youth, hey, I think I need CBD because of this and because of that. I respond to that the same way I would if anyone asked me about any type of supplement. Talk to your physician about it and see if it's a fit. Because if you make that decision, hey, this is the be all end all, and there's many cases of a lot of the CBD companies being snake oil,
That's right.
making all these fake false claims and everything. So it's best to always, any supplement or anything like that, consult with your physician and make sure it's the right move for you.
Yeah,
And you look at, I mean, just vitamins alone.
I was just
How
thinking
many
that.
times have they been checked and it's not in there?
That's
You know,
right.
what it says is because they don't have to put it.
Mhm.
They don't have to be accurate.
All right.
They're not under the FDA.
I mean, the TV was developed to promote advertising. That was the whole reason why television even started, everyone. So if you don't think these people who create commercials and market products and companies, they 100% know what they're doing. You know, the product between, oh, it's natural versus organic. Oh, this is a natural product. They just use that word. It's not organic by any means. And it's the same thing with these CBD products, with you know, all these products that we're going to see with the edibles and that do contain THC. So, you know, we have a lot of different devices and products, examples of products that, you know, we're going to show and you've seen probably throughout this presentation. So mark them down, be on the lookout, keep an eye out for, you know, vapes that are, you know, they're marketed a certain way, that are titled a certain way. Like, watch the branding on a lot of these devices that, you know, we've shown you today, because as a parent, you should be, oh, mom, it's just a vape. Okay, vape is not bad. No, it's just a hide. No, you know, we need to be on the forefront of this. You need to be proactive. Kids right now, and I think I'd love to hear actually both of your opinions, you know, with the whole thing with COVID and, you know, the kids getting basically ripped away from their friend. 1 minute they're in class with their friends, the next minute the weekend happens and they're gone. They will never see those friends again in the same building, potentially until this past September, because the COVID shut everything down. So they lost contact. They had summer. They started the fall. Maybe they were on a hybrid schedule. Maybe they weren't. Maybe they cut the cohorts in half. And I know my kids were personally affected. One friend that, you know, they saw at the end of that 1 year, they didn't see until this year because they cut the cohorts in half by last name. So we know that was very stressful. You know, the continuation of what are the schedule, like our kids love these, believe it or not, love structure. They need structure. It brings balance to their lives. So 1 minute they're in a structure, next minute it's complete chaos, and they had to cope with that somehow. We know, and we've seen, you know, what we've heard from our school SROs, they were doing welfare checks, you know, because of the disengagement of, you know, kids being in isolation. So, I mean, do you think that even COVID and this whole process has affected how our kids cope? And, you know, maybe, so that would be my question number one. And then the question to back up that would be, do you think that some of these processes or things that they've used to cope will have a long-term effect?
100% I do. I mean, as you said, we talked a lot in the beginning about coping mechanisms. Many of our kids' coping mechanisms were taken away from them. They didn't have sports clubs activities, so they looked for any way to cope that they could. Many of them were trapped at home, so use was a big one for them. A lot of school districts right now already foresaw this coming back to school with all these issues, so there's plans developed to help with these social emotional concerns that we're going to be seeing in the districts, and some schools are already seeing too. So it's going to come to the forefront, and hopefully we can address and help these kids out, because hopefully we transition back to some sense of normalcy and get out of this funk. But it did affect a lot of kids for sure.
Yeah.
And the poor seniors, I mean, they can't get back to normalcy. They've lost, like, their last year of sports where they may have gotten a scholarship.
Sure. Yeah.
They've lost the dances, the camaraderie that you get in your senior year. You just can't replace that. And that's gone. And that's why a lot of them are really suffering from depression.
Right.
The social skills are gone. They've learned to sit at home and just sit in front of the computer all day. COVID had a big influence on how our kids are today.
Right. I say this, and in our conclusion to say that, in 2018, 2019, we surveyed our 8th, 10th, and 12th grade students in Lancaster and Depew, and, we had a baseline level for an average of 30-day usage for marijuana and alcohol. And this year we'll be surveying our students once again, and it'll be interesting to see where those numbers are, because we knew before pre-COVID that we were actually making a difference. There was a lot of headway in these particular drugs in underage usage, but we know that because of COVID and nationally, the data has been revealed that it's definitely had an effect on usage. Usage is up, alcohol, binge drinking's up, and so on. So, our goal as, being funded by, the White House Office of Drug Control Policy, we have 2 goals, is to create community collaboration, because we need everyone at the table.
Right.
Here, I'm not sitting alone. I'm not my opinion. It's working with 2 agencies and that work in addiction and prevention. So we need everyone at the table in order to create population level change, community change. And the second goal is to reduce substance use. So we had a goal, when we started this grant 2 years ago, to reduce those levels by 2%. 2% is not a big number. At this point, based on what we've seen with COVID, I personally would be happy if our numbers stayed the same.
Right, yes.
But
your point about having the whole community, back in the 70s when drug use was at its peak, there were 2 women that decided we have to do something, and they started a parent movement across the states. 60% decrease in substance use by kids. It takes everybody.
Yeah.
That parent movement made that big of a difference. If we can get the whole community involved, we can make a big difference.
That's right. And our 2 greatest populations that we need at the table are youth and parents. So, I would highly encourage any parents that could be watching this video, please, it's not, this is very in-depth work that we do. This isn't us just kind of guessing at, some maybe methods that could potentially have an effect on, reducing these numbers. It takes everybody at the table. The government knows that. That's why it's going to take we have a 5-year grant. It takes time for this change to happen. And there's a lot coming at us right now in order to have that type of change. So for any of you watching, please get a hold of us. We have these people, amazing people as resources that you can contact to be able to be educated and equipped to talk to your kids at home, any youth, even if you want to get involved and you're like, I don't agree with anything that you said, you're the exact person that I would love to talk to. Please show me what you know. John has the privilege of being able to talk to a lot of the youth that are, it's a 21 and under here, right, John?
It's actually 12 to 24.
12 to 24, okay. But still, that's an amazing demographic to be able to get firsthand knowledge of what, these young people are going through, what they see, what they're doing, and to have that type of insight, to be able to be equipped to do your job and provide education within the schools, just like, the Prevention Council of Erie County does, is such an asset to our community.
Absolutely.
We can't do this alone. We need everybody's help. We need youth. We need your help. Parents, we need your help. And I would just say, in conclusion, thank you so much, John Bennett, for being here today and sharing your wisdom, your experience, your education with us on this topic, and also to you, Sally, with the Prevention Council of Erie County. I'm so thankful to have you by my side, really, from the very beginning of Focus. So we're very blessed to have just great partners, and we can do it together, as both of these two stated. So we do look forward to any questions that you could have. And just to summarize, I find it very interesting that the same themes that we saw with the youth were exactly the same three themes with the parents. And this is the perspectives that, to summarize, go across the board for both demographics, youth and adult. And those themes are: marijuana is a low perceived risk. We know that the social norms, so people's the social attitudes and the access to marijuana is the same. That's another theme. And lack of consequences is another one. So having low perceived risk is probably the big one. Access is also the big one. And hey, if it's legalized, a lot of consequences, for anyone, over the age. So thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you on the next presentation.